This episode of How to Wrestling is brought to you by our pal Jason Terranova, who requested it over on our Patreon page. If you want to support How to Wrestling and get access to exclusive audio goodies, including 32. That's right, as of now in August 2017, there are 32 bonus episodes available if you become our backer and support the show over at patreon.com/How to Wrestling. It's really exciting now that we're into year 3 officially. Joe and I have reviewed every single pay-per-view event from WWE since SummerSlam 2015, as well as that other bonus goodies such as our Southpaw Regional Wrestling retrospective, NXT TakeOver reviews, etc. So, you like the show? You want to help out Kevin and Joe, your old pals? You can do so. Head over to patreon.com/How to Wrestling, become a backer, get access to all of our audio goodies and all the ones that are coming out in the future. But for now, enjoy this episode, How to Jobbers. Greetings, friends, and welcome to the episode of How to Wrestling, the world's first wrestling podcast detailing how to wrestling, how to get into wrestling, how to understand wrestling, and goodness knows maybe even how to enjoy wrestling. However, once again, I'm Cowboy Kevin Man, riding alongside my stablemate, as always, Joe Graham.
Howdy, hi.
Wow, so are you embracing the rootin' tootin' aspects of my branding?
I feel there's a lot of pressure now every episode for me to come up with some new, catchy slogan for the masses to emulate. As they see me passing on the streets, they're like, "It's Joe. She says, hello."
I can't believe you invented that word, like, hello. It's really taken off.
But now I feel like every time I have to think of something else even wittier, like some other variant of hello.
I mean, just the fact that you haven't done a Lionel Richie hello yet,
Hello.
30 so episodes in. No, it's too late now. You've lost your chance. That's long well and gone. I'm sure there's plenty. You know what? I was in a similar situation with the Attitude podcast where I was like, oh, here's a funny thing I'll do a goof about. And then I realised that I didn't have enough creativity left in me to keep doing the joke. People just message them to me now. I've got a database. So
I'm just going to go on Fiverr and pay someone funnier and cleverer than me to come up with some better ones.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
How do you think podcasts get made, people?
This whole podcast is just paid for by some guy on Fiverr.
I can't wait to get my Fiverr at the end of this. Like, it's going to be so worth this. Oh boy, pin me, pay me. This episode is all about wrestling's losers, wrestling's journeymen, the ham and eggers of sports entertainment. This episode was requested by Jason Terranova. Joe, today we're talking about jobbers. Jobbers! Now, is that a word or a phrase that you had heard before? If you're a jobber, what does that usually mean for what you think?
What, you mean like before I knew anything about wrestling?
I mean, just generally now, if you've been watching wrestling for 2 years or so or thereabouts, have you heard that word used much? Do you know what it means?
No, I've no idea, Kevin. No, I do. I know what a jobber is. A jobber is a opponent in a wrestling match who loses.
Okay.
And normally if they're a jobber, that's like the whole point of them wrestling in general, is they just lose again and again and again. And it's like kind of the reason they exist is to put over bigger names and make them look strong.
And when we're saying putting over, it means like they're
making them look good.
Cool. Yeah. So in a way, a jobber is there to kind of make the people we would normally be talking about in this show, make them look a hell of a lot better. And jobber also can be used as a verb, as in, you're jobbing tonight, Joe Graham.
You're jobbing, okay.
So if you're jobbing Joe, do you know what that means?
I should be a jobber.
Jobber Joe.
Jobber Joe.
Joe the Job.
I've changed my mind. I don't like it. It sounds weird.
Job Graham. Job Anna. I mean, it could all work. But if I say you're jobbing tonight, do you know what that means?
It means I'm losing.
Yeah, you're scheduled to lose.
Yeah.
Also as well, I mean, I love the weird carny language of wrestling that all these words have so many different forms. You can be a jobber, which means that you will usually be jobbing, which entails that tonight you will be doing the job.
That's confusing.
So if it is your job to do the job, you're a jobber, which means you will be jobbing.
I feel like I'm having a conversation with Hulk Hogan.
Have you heard anyone like call wrestlers like jobbers since you've been watching wrestling?
Yes, I mean, I've heard you call some wrestlers jobbers.
Who have I called a jobber? I'm about to do this whole thing about it's really disrespectful when people call wrestlers jobbers when they're not, and I've been doing this.
No, I don't think you do it in that way. More like if we're watching like NXT or something, especially in the earlier days of me watching wrestling, and I'd be like, who's that guy? Why doesn't he have any music at the beginning? How come he's just in the ring already? And you'd be like, well, Joe, he's a jobber. Which means he's going to lose, like, immediately.
So if we were to maybe draw up a short list of things that we can identify a jobber, you mentioned one there. No entrance music.
Yeah, no entrance music. And that's not to say that they, like, come out to silence.
Because some wrestlers have, Dudley Boys and ECW, we said before, they used to come out to silence. But that's
not
more of
that.
a, not that, no.
They just are there already. They don't get the screen time. They haven't earned it yet.
They're not allowed, they don't have USB stick privileges to bring their music in to put on the thumb drive. Like, no, you're not allowed. Other telltale signs of being a jobber?
They lose.
They lose. Oh, another one. Announced as currently in the ring. So they're
yeah?
already there. They've like snuck him in.
I don't know if this is actually one, but it's one I always think of, which is like boring, like ring attire.
Yes.
Like quite create a wrestler.
Yeah, you can usually see a lot of the jobbers who will be brought in. Like if you're someone who's just brought in just solely to be a warm body to lose.
Yeah.
And then by and large, these guys are usually got local wrestlers or indie wrestlers or whatever, and they're brought in to lose a bit, and they will have usually ring attire or ring gear that is quite different to the rest of the roster. It's usually a little bit more bush league or a little cheaper.
Doesn't have the WWE insignias all over it. Like
No, they don't have their own shirt which they're wearing with no trousers on underneath.
Another thing about jobbers, they get thrown around a lot. Like it's always really big moves that happen. Like they're flung out of the ring, or they're like kicked into space, or like I don't know, Braun Strowman throws them off a mountain,
just tears them in half, like grabs one leg and goes like that. You know? That's interesting because I mean, like jobbers have had a really historic role, and I think it's fortunate that we're talking about it now because you and I watched NXT quite a bit over the last few years, and they use jobbers quite a bit, and a lot of guys who are training to become full-time wrestlers start off their life as a jobber, like, just putting people over, losing. Like when we were watching stuff for Sami Zayn, our last episode, and we were flicking through an old episode of NXT, and who did we fucking see with an oddly much fuller head of hair?
Yeah.
It was old Baron Corbin as a jobber, like, hey guys, come on, let's go.
He was looking well.
He was.
He looked less angry.
It's before he had Twitter, I guess. Like,
Oh, another thing about jobbers, quite often they will fight big opponents.
Yes.
Like Nia Jax or Braun Strowman or like big wrestlers that can proper like lob them places.
And in a way, if you want to make someone look bigger, a really great way of doing it is to put in someone smaller with them. Like, so it's kind of, we've seen jobbers in the last couple of years used here and there. And NXT, it's mainly for people who are learning in the performance center, just to get them some time on TV, like expose them, get them a bit of experience. And obviously we've seen a bit of it in the last year with Braun Strowman and Nia Jax, just people brought in to make monsters look more like monsters. But if we went in our time machine, as we often do on a Sunday evening, if we went into our time machine, go back to the 80s, like the heyday of Hulk Hogan and whatnot, like if I watched a 2-hour wrestling show, if we sat down to watch, superstars of wrestling, you wouldn't see like Roddy Piper versus Jake Roberts, and then next it's Macho Man Randy Savage versus the Ultimate Warrior, and then Demolition will take on the Rockers. You're not going to see the big names. It was all Hulk Hogan versus local opponent, Macho Man Randy Savage versus local opponent, like all these jobbers. And the idea is that the superstars, like the WWF superstars, they destroy these normal wrestlers that you would see in other shows. And then it was only when they came live to St. Louis or to your hometown, wherever it is, that's when you got to see Hulk Hogan versus Roddy Piper, or like you got to see the teams collide or the big superstars collide, or on pay-per-view at WrestleMania or Royal Rumble, you get to finally see the big name wrestlers go against each other.
Is that because they had fewer wrestlers back in the day, or because they were a bit maybe more laid back about their workloads?
A little bit of both. I mean, a lot of it was like in terms of prestige and stuff. If you know that, Hulk Hogan's our guy, and we want to have a match. We want him to beat the shit out of someone, but I don't want him to beat the shit out of some guy who could maybe we could get a pay-per-view out of a few months down the line if we build him up. So they would tend to not have the top guys beat the mid-level guys, like you see now all the time on TV. Like you'll see Roman Reigns beat like an intercontinental, like Roman Reigns versus The Miz is something you would see on Raw.
It is more often than not they'll be taking on like the intercontinental champion
Yeah.
or someone who has previously held the belt,
Yeah.
rather than mid-carders without that title.
Yeah, so I mean, now it's usually kind of guys fighting guys maybe they fought before or guys lower down the card, but those guys who are losing are then going to go on and have to feud with someone else. But back in the day, it's just they were quite protective, I guess, about a lot of the superstars. Like, you can't just have people losing left and right. And as well, I think a lot of the guys maybe, like, it was just the way it was back then. Like, if you were someone who signed to a big contract with WWF, it's assumed that you're not going to be losing to loads of guys all the time. You would be enhanced and made to look better by beating up these other jobbers.
I like that, I think. I mean, maybe not used quite that much, but I do like aspects of that, because these days in wrestling, you do get a lot of repeat matches. It's
Yes.
like, oh, here we go. He's not quite won the title yet. We'll have another 4 matches of this before we get to the pay-per-view. We'll have another match, and that's where they'll finally
Like
exchange.
Dean Ambrose and The Miz is one from the last year that you had a lot of grumblings about on our pay-per-view reviews on Patreon. Could you, what was it about, say, their feud that you didn't enjoy? Like,
Well, it's
Dean
just
and Miz?
repetitive. It's like, it's the same thing that happens over and over again. You get a bit bored of it. I think if they had actually added some jobbers or like lower mid-carders into the mix, it would have broken it all up a bit and told a better story.
Yeah, and then when you finally see the two guys go head to head, it means a little bit more. Unfortunately, what would used to happen, I mean, I don't want to just use one little brush and go, jobbers are guys who lose, because obviously there's a bit of a spectrum there. There are your kind of local people who are just brought in. You come in for the night, you'll get beat up, here's your $50, off you go, and if we're impressed by what you've done, maybe we'll call you and give you a tryout or something like that. There are guys who are brought in solely as like a tryout, and it will be like a dark match usually at the very, very start. I think you saw a very young John Cena, someone tweeted in.
Yeah, oh my god, that was amazing.
So what was John Cena's old name when he was an enhancement performer?
The Prototype. Seriously, find this on YouTube, listeners, because young John Cena as the Prototype is a sight to behold. He's got like the worst hair and it suits him so much. It's amazing.
You notice he's got colourful tights and colourful boots.
Yeah, bright purple. He looks like a king.
Yeah, he when he first started, he was like, I want to become a wrestler. So he bought literally like 30 pairs of tights and 30 boots, like they all matched. Because he was an idiot.
Oh,
He
little
didn't
John
know.
Cena didn't know.
He needed a William Regal or some father figure to come in and teach him not to do that.
I bet he didn't think that the next 25 years of his career would be spent entirely in jorts.
They're much comfier, I guess. Right, what I will say as well, though, because we talk about, we got our enhancement guys like that. We've got our kind of guys who are maybe getting a bit of a tryout. You do have as well people who make their kind of career out of being a jobber. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. We do have here, from recent WWE lawsuit that was filed against them, we do have now a legal definition of a jobber as WWE perceive it.
Illegal.
As in, this was used in legal documents by WWE's attorneys to establish what a jobber was.
Wow, why did they need to do such a thing?
It's because they had a number of people who were suing them for post-concussion trauma and,
What?
basically the things that people complain about in wrestling, like no health insurance, they wrestled with injuries, they didn't have retirements, 401ks, etc., etc. So WWE, in their defense, were like, these weren't actually WWE wrestlers, a lot of them.
But even WWE wrestlers don't get pensions and...
Yeah, I know, that's
all
the
that
thing about
malarkey.
it. But no one who's currently employed with WWE is going to try and sue them, I guess. So this is
True.
like a ragtag bunch of disgruntled ex-employees, and as WWE claimed, jobbers. And then the court were like, what's a jobber? So WWE helpfully said, it is a temporary wrestler used on an ad-needed basis, essentially as a prop.
On an as-needed basis.
Yeah, a prop!
A prop?
Ooh! I don't know if I like that as you're things, you're not people.
You have the same worth as a steel chair.
That makes me a bit ooky hearing them refer to them as that, because back in the day, if you can imagine, back in the old before everyone had Let's Play channels, Joe, back in the old cocaine and steroids days of wrestling and late night partying and guys taking themselves very seriously and, you know, everyone's super macho, there were a couple of really horrible instances of wrestlers like taking advantage of jobbers.
What?
Because it's just a jobber, like, he can come in, we can beat the shit out of him, we'll look good. It doesn't matter if they're safe or not, because there's some fucking jobber. They give him $50, they're on TV, who would he care? The Steiner brothers, for instance, they used to kill jobbers, like, they would fucking decimate them.
Well, like, actually hurt them for real?
I would say that they were more concerned with their stuff looking good than the well-being of their opponents.
That's horrible. Because if you haven't got, like, a regular income anyway in wrestling, you just do a couple of matches and they're just very unpleasant and you're left in a lot of pain. Like
Mick Foley in his book wrote about when he was a job guy and he took him and some random dudes, and it was like he'd only been wrestling for like a month or two at the time. He was only 20 years old. He was put against the British Bulldogs and they were literally like, they killed him. Like, and they took his lack of experience as being like an insult, so they were even harder on him, like teach him a lesson type of thing. So it's a bit carny, it's a bit like fucking, protect the business, beat up the outsiders. But
so is that why, I mean, so back in the day, is that why they would have mistreated them so badly? Is because they were on the outskirts of the industry, so therefore it was more important that they protect the business?
I mean, it's going to be different things for different wrestlers. For some wrestlers, it's protect the business at all costs.
I'm guessing for others, it could be like, you've not paid your dues, you're not...
And for other wrestlers, it could simply be, I want to make my shit look good, I'm going to beat you up. And I'm pretty sure in a lot of cases, like the Steiners, that's probably it.
That's horrible.
And I mean, there's been really horrible cases as well of like jobbers being brought in, and like there are guys whose job it is in WWE to be essentially like a jobber wrangler. Like they call up the local schools and like, can you give me 10 guys I need to use for tapings? We'll bring them in a bus, they'll all got beaten up, and then they all go home. Wow. But there's no like back in the day, there was no like vetting, like how much experience have you got? You wouldn't get a chance to talk about your matches with these people. It's just go out there and let the Bulldogs or the Steiners or whoever beat you up. And in a few cases, that led to some really, really scary scenarios. You know Triple H?
Yes, I know Triple H.
You know Triple H's finisher is the pedigree.
Yes.
I do have toys to hand just in case, folks, for if I ever need to explain these things.
So the pedigree is the one where he gets them like upside down and like drops them, right?
Yeah, so he gets them with their faces towards the mat and they go down flat as a pancake and they smash onto the ground like that.
Okay.
Triple H, when he was first starting off and getting over his move, the pedigree, on Raw, they were like, we'll put some jobbers against him. And like the jobber that Triple H took on didn't know what the pedigree was. So instead of falling flat like so, he decided to go straight up like this.
So he's upside down at this point, landing on his head.
Right on his head and neck, and Triple H drove him right into the mat.
Was he okay?
No, he was very hurt.
Oh my God. Because like this is horrible. I assumed that being a jobber was quite an easy job. Because,
oh no!
Because all you have to do is like get thrown around, and if you know how to land safely, then surely the rest is like you're like. I assumed that you didn't have to be even a particularly good wrestler because you're relying on the other person to kind of do all the work.
I mean, you could. A lot of jobbers were like that, and some of the more less experienced ones. I mean, a good jobber should be able to bump around and make your stuff look even better, and there's an art form to that.
Then they should be booking good jobbers.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a big incident that happened. It was around 87, I think it was. I hate to bring them up because you read some horrible stuff about them this week, so your automatic's going to make it seem worse. The Rockers took on a pair of jobbers. One with the name was Chuck Austin. And the finishing move that they're meant to take is called the Rocker Dropper. And Chuck Austin said in interviews afterwards he had been given no preparation as to how to do this move. He had 1 month of experience under his belt.
Jesus.
Like he literally had just started a wrestling training with his brother. And he went into the ring, he got beat up, he was not taking the moves particularly well. They decided to end the match. Let's do the Rocker Dropper. Didn't do it correctly. He just whispered into his ear, put your arm over my leg and take it like this. And he didn't know what the fuck the move was. Landed in a way, he immediately broke his neck. Broke several vertebrae in the neck. And you can see in the video, he's like completely, he's dead weight. And Marty Jannetty goes over and looks down at him. And instead of just pinning him and ending it, he pulls him over, tags in Shawn Michaels, who then does a top rope splash. Then 1, 2, 3, the match is over. He lay in the ring for 20 minutes before any medical personnel came. because in 1987 and where they were, it was a wrestling show. You didn't need to have a ringside doctor.
Oh my god.
The silver lining of that horrible story is that he sued them successfully, $27 million. And
Fucking yeah.
WWE got into the habit then of, okay, don't just get any old geeks, try and get people who are experienced.
And maybe have some ringside medical assistant.
And just maybe like have them like if you're gonna do move, like if it's one thing if you're gonna come in, I'm gonna do like a scoop slam and a big elbow, brother. Like I could probably job to Hulk Hogan if I went off there now, because I know how to fall over and I can have him do his leg drop on me. But if you're going in there doing like the rocker dropper, what's that? It's my new move. Like what?
Yeah.
That's so stressful.
Oh my god. And you're hardly in a position as well. If you're a jobber, you have no power or authority.
Oh, yeah.
You're not in any place to be like, no, I'm not doing that. Fuck off.
Like the jobbers would usually dress separately from the rest of the guys. They didn't get to chat with the guys. They didn't get to chat with the agents or the producers. There would be a guy whose job it was to be like the jobber kind of liaison, and that was pretty much it. So yeah, and I mean, I wish I could say that, oh, the Chuck Austin thing happened and we all learned a lesson and nothing like this ever happened again. But like, I remember like as recent as 2001, like there was a guy called Perry Saturn, who was a very good wrestler, but he was lower down the card, had substance abuse problems, to put it mildly. He was put in the ring against a jobber. He became convinced after 2 moves that the jobber was trying to hurt him and was working unsafe. And then proceeded to beat the shit out of him. Like, he just fucking killed him. He slammed him against the stairs, kicked him as hard as he could in the back. And then Perry Saturn ended up getting in a lot of trouble because of that, and they had to give the guy a fair bit of money to pay him off. But I think the thing I'm trying to get across here is that the jobbing lifestyle is not a glamorous one, Joe. It is at the bottom of the barrel, usually, and there's been so many cases of guys being mistreated. Yeah.
That is horrible. I had no idea. Oh my god.
So yeah, it's a lot of sad stories, I guess, out there. I mean, Chuck Austin's still in a wheelchair, you know?
Here's me thinking this episode was going to be a fun one about all the silly gimmicks that jobbers have had over the years. Like, no, this man is in a wheelchair for the rest of his life.
I've literally gleaned all the fun bits off that, and I'm saving that for our live show, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later on. But there were a couple of guys that the WWE would use throughout the late 80s who were really solid wrestlers, like very, very good wrestlers, who maybe didn't have the X factor and couldn't become like a Hulk Hogan and fill the stadium. There's a great term which I've heard used recently. A guy called Arn Anderson said, don't call wrestlers like this jobbers. It's not what they are. Jobbers is an offensive term for a lot of wrestlers, you see. They're carpenters, not jobbers. They're carpenters.
Okay.
Because a carpenter can't draw a house and bring loads of people into it, but a carpenter can design and build a house and make sure it's got good foundations. So guys like S.D. Jones and Iron Mike Sharp were guys who were really good wrestlers, like really good technical wrestlers, but they were used solely to get other guys over. Like they would go out there, they could wrestle a guy maybe that they wanted to push down the line, who maybe wasn't there yet, do a few matches with Iron Mike Sharp, or a few matches with S.D. Jones. He'll teach you how the WWF style works, and he can feed back then, like, yeah, this guy needs to work on his selling, or his punches ain't so good, or whatever.
That's really clever.
Yeah, it's really smart, and I mean, like, it's funny, because Iron Mike Sharp, if you look up, like, he's lost, like, hundreds and hundreds of matches, but everyone's always respected him as being, like, this awesome wrestler, because he was so good, and he did his job so well, which is making other people look good.
Well, that's the thing I've never really understood about the whole wrestling industry looking down on people who lose all the time. It's all predetermined.
I mean, because we were talking about with Goldberg, and he's like, he didn't want to lose ever.
Yeah, but that made sense because that's his gimmick, which is different from a false reputation that you somehow think you've earned.
Yeah.
Like, if Brock Lesnar, okay, maybe Brock Lesnar's a bad example, but like, okay, Roman Reigns, for example, like, if he was like, oh yeah, I never lose, and that's what makes me a great wrestler. It's like, well, no, it's not, because you win or lose depending on if Triple H or Vince McMahon says you should lose. Like, it's entirely up to them and not up to you. So you can't take any credit for whether or not your win streak is particularly high. Or
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not. It's oftentimes, particularly in the WWE, it's very little to do with you whether or not you've got a good win streak or
it's
not.
It's a lot of luck, and who do you know?
And it's quite interesting as well, because when we talk about people like S.T. Jones and Mike Sharp, I mean, there's other guys like from down the line, like Funaki and Scotty 2 Hotty and Stevie Richards. These are all guys who were never really like over at all. But if you look at how long they were employed by WWE, they got like 10, 15 year careers losing all the time, making a couple of $100,000, every couple of years, selling merch, but they've got good steady income, and they're on national TV. Compared to maybe if you come in for a year and you win a bit and you lose a bit and they get sick of you and you disappear. I mean, that's a smart, it's like that kid in my school who's like, I'm going to become an actuarist. It's a really out there but actually ultimately very responsible decision you make. So I wanted to show Joe a classic jobber squash match that can show the sympathy of the jobber making someone else look way better. And recently, when Joe and I were reviewing Battleground on Patreon, Randy Orton took on Jinder Mahal, who, for some reason, people kept sending us in stuff about for this on Twitter. I don't know. Jinder's not a jobber. He's a WWE champion at the moment. But anyway, Great Khali appeared in that match. And Great Khali, it was a very, very big man. And I think all I could tell you is that he was an awful wrestler. But we decided to watch from ECW in 2008, The Great Khali versus Colin Delaney.
Colin Delaney, who looks a bit like Big Cass in the face.
Yeah, I think so. He got the kind of longness.
He also looks almost exactly like my brother, which is the weirdest thing about this, because they showed a montage of Colin Delaney just getting beaten up by every big wrestler in wrestling.
I love so many things about Colin's look. You've
got a little figure of him, haven't you?
I do. It's honestly, I'm a big wrestling figure collector, and there's so many ones which I'm like, oh, this one is special. My Colin Delaney one, I just adore because he's such a weird thing to see in 2008 that they actually had to give him his own special body because all the other wrestlers were all big jacked up ones, and Colin has to have a special scrawny body that they sculpted just for him.
Yeah, he's a tiny b-boy.
Colin is the least intimidating name ever for a wrestler.
Oh yeah, it's like a proper normal name.
Colin! Yeah. Bless him, L. Colin.
It's the kind of human name I would give to my cat to humanize it a bit.
Well, you'll have to know that Colin Delaney, because he worked here at ECW, when he was on the Indies after this, went by the moniker The Extremely Cute Wrestler.
Oh, he is quite cute.
Now, Colin was meant to be brought in, as we mentioned at the start. He was one of those guys which is, look, we need someone to make Mark Henry look good this week. Send some lad in. And Colin came in.
That's weird, isn't it? Because he's so small. I don't really understand how someone so tiny is supposed to make someone like Mark Henry look good.
Because if you see Mark Henry in there with another wrestler, you're going to see someone who's also, maybe big and kind of muscular. And Mark Henry, you want to get across how strong he is. You get someone in there who's super light like Colin, who bounces around like a pinball. If you look at that montage, everyone in that montage is someone who usually has boring matches. It's Viscera and Kane and Great Khali and stuff like that.
Quite slow movers.
Plodding wrestlers. And then you got Colin who's flying around. And he's so skinny, Colin, as well. That's what makes it look he's got his weird tights. It's got a vest bit that he never pulls up. Assumedly because he's too sore and he's covered in bandages. And he's interviewed Taz is does your mom know that you're wrestling? And he's like, no. It's let's take a look at some of your matches, Colin. And Colin can't turn around because he's hurt his arm, so Taz has to
physically move him.
So when his opponent is announced as the Great Khali, Colin, he doesn't even go, oh no. He
doesn't even react. It's he's comatose and he just stares into nothingness until the Khali is standing directly in front of him.
And Colin's face is right in his boob.
Smushed in his chest, too scared to look up.
Because he doesn't want to see. It's when you're up really tall, you don't want to look down to see how high up you are.
Yeah.
He doesn't look up to see how much bigger the Khali is than him.
It's like when you stand near a skyscraper and you look up and you start to get a bit dizzy.
Get sick. It would have been funny if he looked up, got dizzy, fell over, and then got pinned. So, yeah, the announcers do a great job of putting over, how unfortunate Colin's decision to become a WWE wrestler has been, with Joey Styles quipping, it makes you wonder how much pain one human body can simply endure in a lifetime. It
does look very painful for poor old Colin. I was wondering, what's in it for him? Why? So his story is that he's wants to become a WWE wrestler.
Well, are you asking me in kayfabe?
Yeah, in kayfabe. What's his character's reason for going through all this?
He wants to be a wrestler. He wants to be signed to WWE, make the big money. Got to get your foot in the door some way.
I mean, that's quite brave.
It is,
He's not in any of the montage bits in this, he wasn't made out to be brave.
He never runs, but
No.
he is brave in that sense that he faces the music. Like, I think the reason why Colin was brought in is because the show that he was brought into, ECW, had a very small roster. It only had around 15 guys on it in total. So Colin was brought in just one week, look, make this guy look good. And he did such a good job at it. They were like, look, we've got 5 other guys who could probably do with a bit of shine. Just come back next week. And they like the idea of every week he would have more and more tape. Like the week after this, he came out with a neck brace. The week after this, he was on crutches. Like, he was like a mummy, basically, by the end of it. He had so many bandages on him. So kayfabe, the reason he's here is he wants a foot in the door. Whoever's running the show is obviously enough of a sadist that's like, yeah, fine, fucking, I'll give you $50, come wrestle the Great Khali, you stupid idiot. It'll make for fun TV, I guess. But IRL, like, Colin's just like, it's an opportunity for him, I guess. He gets one hit on the head. Khali chops the top of his head, and Colin kind of like falls like a Jenga tower,
it's
imploding.
like crumples.
And then he gives him the Punjabi plunge, and I thought that would be it, but no, he does the hand vice. Now, there's been so many times where I've watched the Great Khali do that vice, and I just have an out laugh at it. Like, it's so funny. Because, like, if you see him put the vice on, like, Batista, and Batista's going, like, ow, and pulling silly faces, it looks kind of silly. But with Colin here, where, oh my god.
I think I'm going to have actual nightmares about the Great Khali's hands. So scary. I was genuinely terrified he was going to pop his head like a grape.
Because, like, recently, I was massaging your head.
Yeah, it was really nice. And I was like, oh yeah, go a bit harder. And he went slightly too hard. Not through your fault. You're just a big guy and you're stronger than you realise.
I'm just Lenny from Of Mice and Men when I accidentally killed Joe and my mouse.
And afterwards, I had a bit of a headache, and I was like, oh, that's a bit scary. Like, how easy it could be for Kevin just to kill me if he wanted to. He could just crush my head. And then this was, like, just terrifying, because the Great Khali is, like, twice your size, and his hands are the size of cars.
Like, he could probably hold all of your head in one hand.
Oh, easily.
Like, just, like a claw.
And have room to carry several watermelons. He could just easily carry anything. Imagine him making a bed. How easy would it be for him to do that? See, it's funny now, because having watched this match with Colin Delaney, you're like scared of the Great Khali. Yeah.
Which, if you had watched any, if I showed you literally any other Khali match, you'd be like, what a fucking shit, tall, crap house wrestler this guy is.
It's interesting that you say that move isn't, like, scary, though.
It's silly, like, most of the time.
Is that really just... Is the reason that move was so scary then just down to the fact that... Because Colin's reaction, he goes limp, he goes dead in the eyes.
His face goes red.
Red, but grey at the same time.
His face is, like, smeared across Khali's hands.
It's, like, proper upsetting.
And he can't tap out. The referee just has to say, no more wrestling. Stop it. Everyone go home.
And he's just, like, lying there in the corner. Oh, it's horrible.
So, I mean, I think that was one, because I watched all of Colin's squashes, and I was like, who's one wrestler who, like, a jobber, like, that right there proves to me why jobbers are necessary, because, like, he looked so scary, Khali, like, and if anyone came out after that to try and, like, save Colin, you'd think he's a total hero as a result. And they did do a storyline with Colin where he tried to get a contract, and they put him in these really horrible matches, and, like, he eventually managed to finally do it, like, and it was like, jobbers, you can always get these really good feel-good moments from if they eventually manage to win anything.
So what's Colin Delaney up to these days then?
Colin Delaney is wrestling on the indies. He was with WWE for like a year and a half. Then he went on, did loads of stuff with Chikara. He does stuff with, a lot of stuff on the East Coast. He hosts a podcast or two as well. And yeah, Colin's on Twitter as well. I love Colin Delaney. Colin, you've got a fan over here at How To Wrestling.
Aww.
He is extremely cute though, isn't he?
He is a cute boy.
So we talked a lot about how jobbers were used a lot in the 80s and how they were kind of frequently used to, kind of keep our top stars away from each other. But in the late 90s, when we got into the Attitude Era, we kind of stopped using jobbers almost altogether. That kind of stopped being a thing.
The jobbers drought of the Attitude Era.
Well, it's strange because it was around the start of the Attitude Era, they started using the word jobber on TV.
Oh, so they hadn't previously?
No one was ever referred to as a jobber. Never.
How did they refer to them then?
Just a local competitor, enhancement talent. Bobby the Brain Heenan would call them ham and eggers.
Why?
Because they were so low down the pecking order that their money or their payoff was so low that they could just about afford a ham and egg supper from the local diner.
That's sad.
I mean, think if you pop down to a Weatherspoon now, ham, egg and chip is one of the cheapest meals you can get.
Yeah,
so.
it's like £4. Please tell me they're getting paid more than like £4.
I hope so. But yeah, the first time I recall it, there was a guy called Mark Merrow, and he was facing off against a dude called Tom Brandy. And Tom Brandy used to be a jobber, and they were trying to make him not a jobber, so they rebranded him as Tom Brandy. And then Mark Merrow came out and went, "Look at you, you're not Tom Brandy, you're just some jobber." And everyone's like, "You can't say that on TV?" And then they would have all through the Attitude Era and be like, "Well, you're doing the job tonight. I hate to break it to you, you're going to be the jobber tonight."
So there was all this talk about, oh, you're the jobber. No,
Yeah.
you're the jobber. No, I'm the jobber, but there weren't any jobbers.
I mean, you did have one group of jobbers. But because of the weird way the Attitude Era works, like everyone in the Attitude Era had to have a storyline basically. Like even the top to the bottom, everyone had little stories.
But like jobbers bring stories.
Yeah, they banded together, you see. So the jobbers...
Wait, you said there weren't any jobbers?
They weren't jobbers being used like the way we used to use them, in that you'd have a local competitor facing the big star. They were guys who were lower down the pecking order, though, who were still kind of like losers.
Yeah.
Who were referred to as being jobbers.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So chief among which was a guy called Al Snow, who he was so sick of the fact that he was always losing all the time, he decided to form the Job Squad, which had the moniker of Pin Me, Pay Me. 1, 2, 3, 4 life. Because he realised that him and all the jobbers were getting no respect. So it was him, the Blue Meanie, Gilbert was part of the Job Squad as well.
It's like a union for jobbers.
It was essentially, they were like, look, no one looks out for us, we have to look out for each other. It was like Bob Holly was in there, Scorpio, all these, like, they had nothing connecting them other than they lost lots.
That's amazing.
So yeah, they just kind of tried to watch each other's backs and, you know, make sure that no one would fuck them over, but they usually end up getting beat up anyway. But yeah, it's just like, it's so strange that they kind of pivoted away from jobbers being like the TV show stopped being man versus jobber or woman versus jobber. It started being, you know, tonight The Rock will take on the Road Dogg, or X-Pac will take on Kane, or The Undertaker and Steve Austin will take on the Dudley Boys. Like, that's started all through the Attitude Era because you had two shows now that were competing head to head, WCW and WWF.
Oh, so they had to increase their output.
Yeah, so it's like, well, we can't have a jobber match because if I have a jobber match, the other guys won't have a jobber match, and then we'll lose the rating. So that's kind of where jobbering lost its part of the show.
Really interesting.
Yeah. I do feel it's something which is missed.
It is, but I also really like the sound of the way they did it in the Attitude Era.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like they still had jobbers, but they were contributing to a story now.
Yes, so they're kind of taking part almost. And I mean, one person who cropped up all throughout the 80s and the 90s and the noughties and some of the most recent decade, whatever we're calling that now, the teens. Do we call it the teens?
I don't know.
Noughties I never thought was going to catch on.
teens?
The teens, whatever. I can't wait till we get to the Roaring Twenties in a few years. That's going to be great. Like, but the Brooklyn Brawler is someone who has been a constant. Like, he has always been there. You've looked up a few pictures of the Brooklyn Brawler, Joe. How would you describe the man who fights from the Bronx?
He's a bit greasy looking. He wears like a weird t-shirt jumper thing that's like deliberately cut open with scissors at several points over it, and it's a bit gross and stained. Kind of guy who you'd imagine definitely seeing on those old blokey pubs.
You can see the Brooklyn Brawler smoking a cigarette slightly too close to a pub door, spitting.
Yeah.
So the Brooklyn Brawler was originally just like a guy who was brought in as a jobber back in the 80s. He was there to lose to Hulk Hogan primarily. And he got a backstage role. He ended up being like an agent and a producer, and he would do like backstage promos. That was his job. But anytime they needed a warm body to go out there, he'd take off his, you know, agent hat, put on the old Brawler t-shirt. He'd always bring it with him. And because he was a trained wrestler, he'd go out there and bump around a little bit.
That's really clever to do kind of both the backstage agent side of things and be a jobber.
Yeah, because he knows exactly what they want then, you know?
You know the industry, you've got the contacts, and also you can fit in a nice... Because I imagine, like, jobbing as a full-time job, I can't imagine it's the best pay.
No, you would make lower... The thing is, you make lower pay and you don't get merch, But you'll be there. Usually, if you play your cards out, you can have a career
Yeah.
that's 3 times as long as most WWE careers.
So supplementing that with another kind of role, which is less physically intensive, is really smart.
Very smart. The Brooklyn Brawler had like the sweet spot there where you got to do like be involved in creative stuff and, you know, get to wrestle a bit here and there. And yeah, like we said in the Attitude Era, they would often use like jobbers as like kind of part of the story. And Brooklyn Brawler was used as a punchline very, very often, as was Gilbert, like we mentioned in our Goldberg episode. And here in this scenario we're watching, it's Triple H. He has a 3-on-1 handicap match. If Triple H wants to get his match against Chris Jericho, he has to beat 3 of the jobbingest jobbers on the roster, which is Kai and Tai, Taka Michinoku, and Sho Funaki, and the Brooklyn Brawler, which has to be the oddest threesome of wrestlers I've ever seen together.
Yeah?
I mean, what holds these guys together other than the fact that they lose lots and the colour blue?
I don't know. I was hoping you could tell me that.
It's just I think the idea of Triple H having an unfair match, but against guys who are so low down that it's technically fair.
Yeah.
Mick Foley was the kind of the guy in charge of the show at the time, so he was like having fun and getting to Triple H this way. He was a nasty baddie.
It was interesting though because the jobbers in this match are really good wrestlers.
Yeah.
Like, I thought they made Triple H look quite bad.
In what sense?
Well, they were doing these really impressive, like the kind. It's not the Kai and Tai, is it? It's
just
Kai
and Tai, yeah.
Right. Well, they were doing all these amazing, like, flip-de-doo moves off the side of the ring, and, it was just really impressive stuff that they were doing. Meanwhile, Triple H is kind of, like, throwing a punch here and there, and...
The pedigree.
That's kind of it.
No, you're dead right, and unfortunately, like, very often is the case, if you're kind of a career jobber or someone they put in that spot, like, they're not going to put someone who they think is really shit and, like, really can't work well or, you know, isn't a good wrestler. They rarely put them in those spots because... they're not going to be able to make anyone else look good. So, unfortunately, yeah, you've got people like Taka Michinoku at that time was probably one of the best wrestlers on the planet.
Jesus.
But he was just put in that position because, you know, A, he was a good wrestler, B, they didn't know what to do with him, and C, he was under contract.
Because I kind of feel that, like, you could almost use it to the advantage of modern day wrestling, and that, you know, that it's a thing quite often comes up in conversation about wrestling these days is wrestling too flip-de-doo? Is it all too high flying? And does it make the other wrestlers look bad?
Yeah.
I think if you had more lower card guys and jobbers that did that style and still lost, that wouldn't be as much of an issue.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that might kind of like level it out a little bit almost.
Be like, well, you've got all these high-flying moves, but can you actually win a match?
So it's great here when they're coming out, like, even though there's 3-on-1, the announcers are making out that it's still, like, they're at the disadvantage. They refer to Brooklyn Brawler as having spent more time on the canvas than Rembrandt. So all 3 of them, like, try and team up and beat up Triple H. Like, he keeps, like, managing to throw him out of the ring, and he keeps managing to, like, start beating them up. And anytime they're in danger, they all jump to each other's rescue. I thought Brooklyn Brawler, when he came out here, looked like some sort of, like, unwashed stepdad who doesn't realise that it's his weekend with the kids. Like, he's just coming out there, his hair's all messy, he's wearing like a torn t-shirt. Do you want to go to the Yankees game?
His t-shirt confuses me though, because it's you don't get accidental rips like that. It's not like it's just wear and tear. He's taken a pair of scissors to that in a very intentional way.
Jerry Lawler used to have a great line about the Brooklyn Brawler, which was, someone once told the Brooklyn Brawler, "Don't ever change, man." And he thought that to mean that never change your clothes. And that's why he always has these smelly jeans and smelly t-shirts. So Triple H hits a pedigree to Funaki, eliminates him. A pedigree to Taka Michinoku, eliminates him. Just the Brawler left on his own, that's what I love. Like, Brawler, like, even though he's a total jobber, knows how to do a little bit of a comeback and gets the crowd really get into it.
It was like a really good, albeit very short match.
Yeah, it's like he has that like, even in 5 minutes you can have the peaks and troughs with someone who knows what they're doing. Jericho runs in and hits the lion salt on Triple H, who just shoved the referee. Brooklyn Brawler slithers over, manages to pin Hunter Hearst Helmsley. That's right, the Brooklyn Brawler, whose one win I think he's had in his entire career, is over Triple H.
Wow.
Which is fucking amazing.
Could we get, like, a return from him in 2018? Like, Triple H, I beat you once and I'm back.
I mean, if we're to do it the way Triple H does his things now, right, it would have to be Triple H comes out like the Raw before WrestleMania, wearing his leather jacket and some, cool jeans, and the Brooklyn Brawler also comes out in a leather jacket and jeans, and they've got sunglasses, and they're like, You think you're the baddest motherfucker? I'm bad. No, I'm bad. Fucking dads.
Yeah.
So my highlight of this was Taka and Funaki, who are probably together, combined, lighter than the Brooklyn Brawler, come in and they try and lift him up on his shoulders, and they're there like wobbling, and he's like, yeah, with one finger, like, I won one match. And Triple H just lays them all out afterwards. Fucking hell. I enjoyed that match. Very fun little trip down memory lane, seeing what you can do with jobbers against main event talent. And when you've got someone like Triple H who's meant to be the top bad guy, and he's losing to the fucking jobber, like, it just shows you, like, losses don't really matter if you carry it well, you know? So there are a lot of wrestlers who started off their lives as jobbers. I thought I'd read out a few to you now and surprise you. Young Edge started off his life, he was a total jobber. He was known as Sexton Hardcastle when he first was wrestling. Sexton Hardcastle. The Hardy Boys, both Matt and Jeff, at the age of 16 were jobbers for WWF.
Are there clips of them?
Yes. Guess who Jeff Hardy's first match was against?
I don't know.
Razor Ramon.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, Razor Ramon like had matches against Matt and Jeff Hardy when they were like 16 years old. If you just quickly Google Matt Hardy or Jeff Hardy jobber, you can see them, how young they look.
Whoa, he's a boy.
Look at them rat
That's
tails.
so weird because he looks exactly the same except a boy.
He looks like a total jobber though, doesn't he? With his like lightly coloured tights and his bad hair and his little boy face.
I actually can't find any pictures of his outfit. It's just like cropped at the waist so he looks naked in all of them. But wow. Okay, hang on, I've got to find Jeff now.
Young Jeff Jobber Hardy.
Jeff Hardy looks the same.
Yeah, you reckon?
He's just got really bad hair. He's got like pop boy circa 1990s hairstyle, like curtains.
He always had his finger on the pulse even when he was a jobber.
Oh my god, sorry. But just looking at these pictures of young Matt and Jeff Hardy as jobbers, look who I found.
Oh, young Samoa Job. Yeah, tell you about Samoa Joe.
Oh, wow.
It's funny, a lot of the wrestlers who went on to become the fucking kings of indie wrestling and are now the stars of WB. Daniel Bryan, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe. Like 2000 and 2001, they were all having job matches on Sunday Night Heat and Jacked and Metal and all the other job shows.
Yeah, I'm really glad that I already know that John Cena was a jobber, because otherwise, from that list, I would have kind of gotten the impression that with a lot of wrestling, they would have maybe have seen those stars and been like, they don't look like top guys. They're a bit skinny or a bit short.
Yeah.
Let's try them as jobbers and see how they get over. But like John Cena as the prototype looks exactly the same now, only in a different outfit. Like that is the body of what you'd imagine Vince McMahon to be like. Oh, that's my top star. And yet he was a jobber too. So that's good to know that it's not just like the ones who you wouldn't think fit the WWE mold.
Yeah, they had to go that way and become a jobber and then toil for years. I mean, if you ever notice when some people get like kind of funny about certain wrestlers kind of bypassing the early parts of their career, like people resented Roman Reigns, even Charlotte to an extent, who were wrestlers who kind of were brought in, set aside and groomed, whereas back in the day you kind of had to earn your stripes. You had to be a jobber. You had to lose for a while to kind of fully appreciate, like even Kurt Hennig, for instance, Mr. Perfect.
Wow.
You know, he started off, even though he was the son of a legend, he started off at the bottom. He was a jobber for a few years as well. But like, yeah, you had to start off as a job guy. That's kind of the way it was.
I get why people are annoyed about people bypassing that, because it's an algorithm that makes sense. Get your practice in while you haven't got a big name for yourself, and get all these losses out of the way. Really practice against these big name opponents so that when you do make a big debut, you've got a lot more experience.
Yeah, and I think there's so much you can learn in that role as someone who's losing. If you are in the ring with someone who can teach you or someone who's like knows what they're doing, I imagine it's such a learning experience. Like Steve Austin, when he first became Stone Cold, he would wrestle jobbers, and he would do a thing where he would come in and say, come on, guy, come in the ring and wrestle Stone Cold. You can tell your grandkids you beat the WWF champ. And he would lie down and let the guy pin him 1, 2, 3. And then you just get up and beat the shit out of him and then kill him in 10 seconds.
But he would actually let them beat him?
Yeah, he would let them get on top. And like, oh, there you go. You can tell. I think it's so he could like add a wrinkle, add a story. But I mean, imagine like there's guys who could then use that down the line as like kind of a learning experience. And you pick up so much, I guess, from some of these wrestlers if you're lucky enough to be in there in the ring with jobbing to a big superstar. In New Japan Pro Wrestling, they've got a system which is like the Young Lions system, where no matter who you are, no matter what your background is, even if you're like a top MMA star or like the handsomest son of a bitch in the world or someone who's pegged to be the next person, as a young lion where you wear plain black trunks, plain black boots, you never win, you never get a chance to cut a promo, you never get anything, you just lose. And everyone has to do that. It's like your year of as a loser. And I think it's like it humbles everyone to an extent, and everyone learns kind of from that experience.
I like that idea, and it makes a lot of sense. However, you can totally see how that kind of attitude would then breed resentment among people that don't follow that exact path.
Yes, yeah.
Which isn't really fair, because not everyone's going to have the exact same walk of life into wrestling that everyone else does.
And I think there are some people as well who unfortunately can't start life as a jobber.
Yeah.
I mean, because we're going to talk a little bit now about the modern role of jobbers. We mentioned at the start about Braun Strowman and Nia Jax, who arguably, if you think about who they are, I mean, could you see like Braun Strowman jobbing for a year or Nia Jax jobbing for a year?
I was actually going to say, because when we're talking about Colin Delaney, fighting someone like Mark Henry, how can he make him look strong and big when Colin Delaney is tiny? And I was thinking, like, would it not have been more impressive to almost have someone like Braun Strowman or, say, Nia Jax as a jobber role, to see them get beaten and they're huge, great big monster types? It's like, whoa, but if you can beat these guys, then you must be really strong.
That's funny. Yeah, they did that in ECW with Spike Dudley, the younger Dudley brother, he was the runt of the litter. He's like 5 foot, 150 pounds, and he got the moniker of the Giant Killer. There's like, there's no way he'd be able to ever beat up Bubba Ray Dudley. And then he would take on, they would find these massive, like, sometimes like super obese wrestlers who were like 700 pounds, who would just like fucking come into the ring and take one move from Spike Dudley and he managed to beat them. I was like, oh my god, like, so I guess there even is still a role for big people to play.
I think definitely. You just need to book it right. I think you should have, jobbers should be diverse, I think. And that way you can tell the story you need to, depending on who you've got against them in the ring.
Because I mean, I think if you had a good jobber who comes in and you have like someone like, you know, like a Hideo Itami or a Seth Rollins, like a smaller, quick guy, and he's able to like just take them apart, even though they're so big. You could squash them that way, and they would still like, you get a lot out of it, I guess. It doesn't have to be a pipsqueak all the time. But speaking of pipsqueaks, we had to find a Braun Strowman match that would really, really do it for us and do justice. I wasn't originally going to watch just a straight up classic Braun Strowman versus everyone's favourite man missing a chin, James Ellsworth. But unfortunately, that match just not a lot happens in it. He just beats up Ellsworth. I mean, I guess it's worth mentioning Ellsworth is a modern day kind of example of a jobber being brought in. He was brought in for one night to lose to Braun, and he said, "Any man with two hands has got fat and chains," and Braun killed him. And Ellsworth trended worldwide because he was weird looking and he had sympathy.
I wonder if partly is, well, though, he is quite reminiscent of Colin Delaney.
Yes.
Like, physically, they look quite similar.
And even Colin Delaney, actually, is very reminiscent of a brainchild of Paul Heyman from back in ECW, which is the guy called Mikey Whipwreck. Which even the name, Mikey Whipwreck, sounds like the guy's been caught in some sort of terrible accident. But Mikey used to set up the ring for Paul as, like, you know, local kids. And they set up the ring, and then the trade-off, the pay was they got to bounce around the ring and just play wrestling for a little bit and work on their moves before the show started. And Paul would watch, and he said that Mikey, because he was such a small young little boy and he looked so sympathetic when he got hurt, and he's like, I need you to be my guy. So Paul had Mikey Whipwreck, and he would come out wearing these awful like wizard t-shirts, like with dragons on them. His entrance music was Loser by Beck. He'd have mismatched knee pads because he had to borrow them from people in the locker room. And he never got in a single offensive maneuver.
Wow, that's impressive.
Like, there was no hope spots in his matches. He just got beat up. But then, like, he managed to, once he was put in a match for the ECW Championship, and he managed to win. He managed to, by fluke, beat Steve Austin in ECW.
With no offensive moves.
With no offense, just managing to get a pin or managing to get the belt or whatever it was. There's a great one as well where Mikey got a tag team championship match, and because no one liked Mikey because he was so shit, he was on his own, so he just spent the whole match getting beat up by the tag team champions, and by complete fluke, banana peel finish, Mikey managed to win. So Mikey Whipwreck magically became the tag team champions on his own. And then Mick Foley just came out as Cactus Jack. He's like, hey, I'm your partner, and now I'm one of the tag team champions. So he became Mikey's tag partner after he won the belts, because I can hitch my wagon to this kid.
Wrestling.
So yeah, I mean, ideas circulate in wrestling, I guess. Ellsworth is a similar story that has been told before and again, but there's a lot to be said about a loser. Everyone loves a loser in wrestling. So Braun Strowman taking on not one, not two, but three gentlemen. It's from Raw just past year, October 16th, 2016. It's Braun Strowman versus the Mile High Trio. We didn't like Braun Strowman back in the day, Joe.
It's so weird to think now that we didn't like him.
So I think we've obviously changed our tune, because we were whinging about how shit he was. And I mean, a lot of people hated Braun because he didn't go to NXT or the Performance Center. He just pretty much went straight to the roster after basic training.
He wasn't that good in the beginning, which especially rubbed everyone the wrong way, I think. If you're not going to go to NXT, I think there's this expectation that you have to be really good.
You have to be like AJ Styles.
Yeah, come on, only the best get to circumvent NXT like that.
I mean, they could pretty much have a giant banner in the Performance Center, and it's like just Samoa Joe looking surly going, if he has to come, so do you. So yeah, what is it, do you think, in the last year has changed the opinion on Braun? Because he's my favourite thing in wrestling right now. Unabashedly, summer of 2017, my favourite wrestler is Braun Strowman, but...
It's really difficult to say, because watching this, it was just like watching current Braun. So I can't even look back and be like, oh yeah, that's what I didn't like about him. Because he's throwing around jobbers here the same way he throws around top stars now. Only difference being now he's throwing around Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar instead of these guys.
I guess the thing was that when Braun was set off on his own, they took him away from the Wyatt family. He used to be part of that group with Bray Wyatt.
Again, that's so weird to think.
It seems like a million years ago now, doesn't it?
Yeah, he seems so distanced from them.
And when he was on his own, he seemed so lost. And then they started putting him against jobbers. And my thought was, he's big, they obviously see something in him, but they have nothing for him. So this is a vain attempt for him to get better, I guess. But apparently, every time you go out and squash a jobber, Vince McMahon would go through a fine-tooth comb with him afterwards. Here's everything you did wrong. Wow. Here's how you need to improve. You can't do this in a match. You can't show this emotion. You have to do that. He was using all these job matches as intensive training, essentially.
God, no wonder he improved so much.
Yeah.
I had no idea. That's fantastic. I didn't know Vince even still did that.
Yeah, no, Vince, there's certain kind of people who he almost on a one-to-one basis, and Braun has talked in podcasts and interviews about how hands-on Vince and Triple H have both been, and said they were really hard on him. They said if it wasn't perfect, they would give out to him, they'd chew him out and force him to get better, essentially. And he did.
It's fucking worked, because he's one of the best guys in WWE at the moment.
Yeah, and we got Ellsworth out of it as well. I mean, this is great. He throws him around like they're nothing, and then he's got this red pants dude who he throws from inside the ring all the way to the outside onto the two other little jobbers. Fucking incredible.
Just lobs him.
It's great because they use it as a showcase, because Braun, not only does he get to show his power off, they also have things as well where Braun does a running drop kick, or a guy runs away from him and Braun manages to outrun him even though he's 4 times the size. The end comes where he hits some finishers and just stacks them all up one on top of each other. He wins and goes, "Brah!" And I think, I know this works so well with Braun. I know they did a similar thing with Nia Jax. Do you think it's been as successful with Nia Jax as getting her over as being a total monster killer? Because I don't know if it has been as successful.
I think it worked when they first were doing it on NXT, but they've not done it since she's moved up to the main show, have they?
When she first debuted, she had a few weeks of job matches where she just beat up jobbers.
But unfortunately, obviously it takes more than just beating jobbers to improve. And I think, if Braun Strowman's getting this one-on-one mentorship with the two most powerful men in WWE, that's going to do a lot of good for your career over Nia, who I'm guessing hasn't had that same privilege.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, Nia's not talked about that, I guess. I mentioned this on Twitter because I was asking, really was interested to chat with people over on How to Wrestling on Twitter about, why they thought certain things work in the current climate and haven't worked for other people. And someone made a very astute point that the job matches are all well and good, but it's who they feud with after the job matches.
Yeah.
And I can't even remember who Nia feuded with after her job matches. I think she just went into circulation. Whereas Braun feuded with Sami Zayn. And they had that whole story about Sami being killed, and how much does that make Braun look even better still.
Yeah, it's true.
We can, with our jobbers, get some feel-good moments. We've obviously talked about Mikey Whipwreck. We've seen the Brooklyn Brawler. We had to watch this match. It was the most requested one and is the classic feel-good moment. Part of a series of 3 matches these two did. It's Body Donna Skip taking on Barry Horowitz from SummerSlam 1995. A little recap video says that Barry Horowitz is a journeyman with the longest losing streak in WWF history. Aww. So Barry Horowitz, it was Jewish, has a streak, but the streak is the opposite, is all loses.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
Sorry, this is like blown my mind. You've got a Jewish wrestler called Barry Horowitz who has a streak.
Yeah.
And it's about losing.
Yes.
And then Goldberg comes in.
Yeah.
Jewish wrestler has a streak, only he fucking wins all the time.
It's funny because we got so many of those messages where people were talking about
how
Goldberg was like a shift away from how Jewish wrestlers have been presented in the past.
I understood at the time, yes, that would be a big deal. But seeing, I think having done Goldberg so recently and seeing, especially what a stereotype Barry Horowitz is. He's a Jewish accountant with a pocket protector and he comes out to
have
the stereotypical Jewish music. God, Goldberg must have been a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, because people messaged with me and pointed out, there's other wrestlers other than Barry Horowitz and Goldberg who are Jewish. Obviously, Matt Bloom, known as Tensai or Prince Albert, he was Jewish. Dean Malenko, Colt Cabana. But I guess it's because it was kind of front and center, their Jewish background was part of their character or who they were, and to see how Barry is presented.
Serious? It's literally opposite. Wow.
I want to be the Jewish kid in 1995 who's a wrestling fan with other wrestling fans. Jesus Christ, you must have got people patting themselves on the back all around you all the time.
I do like the patting yourself on the back thing. That's really funny.
It's great because in Colt Cabana he was briefly in WWE and he would pat himself on the back now and then as well, which is great.
I was reading online that apparently Barry Horowitz had a jacket with a hand on the back.
I need that jacket. His opponent, Skip, who's accompanied by Sonny, she calls him Barry Horriblewitz.
Oh, very witty, that one.
Excellent wordplay right there. Barry comes at him with full force here. This is actually quite a long match, quite a back and forth match. And the idea being that Barry, he's a loser, but he's tasted success recently, so he knows he can win. The crowd are so behind him. Hearing an entire arena go, Barry, 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 mate, that's what my cat was called a few years ago. Barry, what an unimposing wrestling name. Barry and Colin, I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's a trend of jobbers having the most normal names.
And here's my tag team partner, Keith. Come over here, Keith. Yeah.
This is such a not jobbers match. You would have had to have told me that this is a jobbers match, because if you watch out of context, you would have no idea.
Yeah, because it's if Skip... The story is that if Skip wasn't such a fucking idiot and didn't keep stopping to do, warm-up exercises and, chat with Sonny, or, even at one point, stopping the pin to goes, I can win in a few minutes if I want to anyway. The story is, if he tried and was focused, he could have beaten Barry. But Barry's got passion. That's what they're trying to tell you, is that even if you always lose, if you have that passion, you can pull it out. That's the whole thing. And I know a lot of people, we've ragged on Barry. I know there are people who, Barry Horowitz is a hero for them. And that's a weird thing to
Well, he's
imagine.
certainly got admirable traits. I think if you're going to be a jobber, but how long do you say he had his career as a jobber then?
I mean, he would have been there for 4 or 5 years. He lost a couple of 100 matches in that time.
See, that's pretty impressive.
It is. He's consistent, Barry. Give him
And
that.
to remain very likeable as well.
Yeah.
You've got to have a lot of positive attributes that people can identify with.
Absolutely. I mean, Action Bronson, the rapper, did a song, an homage to Barry Horowitz, about him being his favorite wrestler when he was a kid. And, that obviously was the most relevant Barry's name had been in recent years. And then he was asked, if he wanted to come, appear with Action on one of his big shows he was doing. And Barry refused. He thought the song was disrespectful because he referred to him as a jobber in it. He's not a jobber. How dare you?
Oh my God, he was upset about being called a jobber.
Yeah, and then he said that if anything, Action Bronson should be coming to his show when he wrestles there. I just love wrestling, like how weird people are about things like that. But
I don't think I'll ever understand why being called a jobber is like an insult or anything.
I think, like, just this is like a public service announcement. If you ever meet a wrestler, even in jest, don't call him a jobber. Just better safe than sorry. No one's gonna, like, at best they'll go, oh yeah, okay. Worst case scenario, they'll be really offended and not come to your rap concert. So the end comes when Barry Horowitz, in a moment where Hakushi, the tattooed, mysterious Japanese warrior, appears, jumps over both men.
That was amazing.
They're very impressive.
He did a magic move there.
And Barry manages to roll him up. Such is the jobbing nature of Barry Horowitz that Joe was convinced that Barry had actually lost for a good few minutes.
I swear his shoulders were down.
But the way, when he wins, like, he's literally crying. He's in tears, like,
Yeah.
that he finally manages to win again on pay-per-view. And I think, like, that's an important thing about jobbers. We've talked about the roles that they can have. They can make other guys look better. They can help guys improve. They can be a means for someone to themselves improve. But I think a real great thing about jobbers is they can give you those feel-good moments. Like when Ellsworth managed to pin AJ Styles that one time this year, that was great. When he did the other 2 times, maybe that was not as great. But you can get feel-good moments from jobbers. And yeah, we had some really, really great matches sent to us. Those are just but a few. All right, I'm going to have to clear the air now because Joe is so excited or pent up. I mean, you can pitch this as the dilemma that I've been in this week.
I haven't even been informed enough about this to know what it is. All Kevin has said to me, and he said this to me like over a week ago, he was like, oh my God. I was at work, he messaged me, he was like, oh my God, Joe, I've found out the most mind-blowing thing about this Jobbers episode
I
ever.
had to tell someone.
I was in the middle of a meeting. I was like, oh my God, I wonder what it is. Like, I came out of the meeting. I was like, what is it? What is it? Oh, I can't tell you. It's a spoiler. I have to save it for the episode. And then Adam came around earlier this week and Kevin was like, oh my God, Adam, this amazing thing I've discovered. It's mind-blowing. What the fuck? And again, not allowed to say it because you've got to save it for the episode. And now I hear you've contacted Brian Zane about it.
Yes, I needed to.
And you still can't tell me what on earth is going on. Please break the news.
The problem was, like, I when I found this, I was like, oh, whoa, it's a thing that I didn't know about. Have to tell. And you know, you can just view it as that I care about you so much that you're the first person I thought.
No other friends.
Yeah, so... And the problem was, well, is like, then later on the day, I was really struggling with it. I was like, oh, I've got a cracking analogy. Oh, wait, I can't use that because it will literally spoil it. I wanted to find a compilation of job matches, like a couple back-to-back, just so you could see the squashes. And you know, we ended up watching a lot of squashes. We had to find them painstakingly on the network, which kept crashing every 5 minutes. But we have seen all the matches we wanted to. But I wanted to originally find like just a compilation. Like, you know, we found a mini compilation of Goldberg winning matches. I wanted to find a compilation of jobbers losing. And I couldn't find anything on YouTube or any of the other places where I would usually look. So I just went into Google and I looked for it. And I found 1 or 2 threads, people asking, is there any videos up there? No one had anything. And then there was one which was like, there's this really, really great compilation of jobbers. Check it out. And the video was dead. It was an old link and it was gone. I was like, damn it. But then I scrolled down and read the other comments. And someone went, man, did you read some of the comments on this video? It's really, really weird. Like, what's going on here? And then Brian Zane, I could tell it was Brian because it had his logo and all of his links were on his bio there on the forum saying, oh yeah, back when I was a jobber, when I turned to wrestle and I'd put up some of my matches, I got all these kind of comments as well. And it was very, very strange. I didn't know what it was. So I went down the rabbit hole. Before I asked Brian, by the way, if you've not checked out Wrestling with Regret with Brian Zane, go fucking check it out. The best thing on YouTube wrestling related as far as I'm concerned.
I didn't know he was a jobber. That's really interesting.
Yeah, Brian learned how to wrestle, so he did some job stuff back in his day. Like, you know, he got beat up on local indies and whatnot. So I went and I looked, tried to find out what it was, and it turns out there's this entire, very big subculture about jobbers as a sexual fetish.
No!
Yeah! A whole fucking thing. Fan fiction, video compilations, as in people put up videos of old job matches and write long descriptions about the backstory of the jobber, specific moves that are extra sexual. No! You know that movie Tickles, the one that we watched recently?
I was just thinking that.
That's the analogy I came up with.
Yes.
I was like, oh, Joe, it's a sex
and
thing,
it would have ruined it.
It would have ruined it.
Oh my god, I need a documentary about this fetish right now.
So I've watched some terrible stuff. I've been podcasting for 6 years, and I've watched some terrible stuff. And I've had to endure some terrible things. I've had a lot of great times, don't get me wrong. It's been all fun by and large. But the single hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my professional podcasting career is send a Facebook message to Brian when I noticed he was online, go, "Hey Brian, haha, hope this isn't too weird, but can you tell me about when you were sexually objectified when you were..."
Fucking hell!
And Brian, who by the way, after what seemed, he was typing, I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. I was like, never mind. I'll tell you, Brian, if you're listening, the message I sent you, that was draft 3 and day 4. So I'd agonised over this, how to approach you.
Poor thing. Oh my god. I bet he was totally sweet about it as well.
He was a total sweetheart about it, including like trying to figure out why people might be into that type of thing.
How fascinating.
So it is like a sub-dom thing from what I can generally tell.
And is this a fetish that mainly women like, or men?
It seems to be mostly gay men.
Okay.
But there seems to be a section of
course,
women who are into it as well. So the general gist of it is the jobbers are like these, like if you were a small, weak little jobber getting beat up by a big burly dude, that's like fucking, whoa, 10 out of 10, that's the shit.
So like James Ellsworth versus Braun Strowman.
Now, James probably wouldn't fit into that category because they have a special type that they like, which is kind of like twinkly young boys.
Oh, of course, little cute boys like Colin Delaney.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Brian told me the way he first found out about it was when his matches got put on a playlist that was like cute twink wrestlers get the shit beat out of them or something like that.
Wow.
So there's loads of things, certain moves, particularly like a gorilla press slam where you pick them up and press them over your head. Like almost every fan fiction I came across had that in there as like a big thing. Like, he gorilla pressed them, he picked them up and he was helpless. Pulling them up for a slam and pulling on their tights when you're doing it as well. Give them a little cheeky pull of the tights. That's also very sexy. And the highlight of this for me has to be what I found onto a forum, which is someone like, yeah, I found out about this when I found an old Arn Anderson match, and it had like subtitles over it which was saying, look at the fucking stud Arn Anderson just so you know, Arn Anderson, you are a sex god in a very small subculture. You are worshipped as a sexual being, and I think it's about time we recognise AA as being a sexual being.
So the fan fiction, does it end up with them having sex?
No, it's just they get beat up and humiliated.
That's it.
Sometimes they have sex afterwards in the locker room or in the showers and stuff like that. But it's this whole thing about tough guys taking advantage of innocent young little guys.
Like, not to kink shame, but that's a bit weird.
I'm going to say it's weird not from a kink shaming standpoint, because whatever you're into, whatever. But like, just for me, it's like, I can't believe that this is like, you come across stuff when you're like a wrestling fan and you kind of, everyone knows the things, surely. And this is one which I'm pretty sure most people aren't going to know about.
It never occurred to me. I mean, it makes sense. I can understand, like, now you've said it to me, like, of course. It's like the tickling thing.
Yeah.
Like, once you hear people jack off over people being tickled, it's like, yeah, that's not really that surprising, I guess. But, wow.
It's just funny to think, like, there's all these guys who've been putting on these, like, you know... all these carpenters who've been putting on matches, and they've been to a different type of gratification, I guess.
Maybe that's why the term jobber is such like an offensive slur to wrestlers, is because they don't want to be reminded that
no one masturbates to me. Get out of here.
That's so interesting.
So Joe, I know just you didn't give any star ratings to any of our matches tonight, but could you, just for my benefit at least, or at least for the subculture's benefit, could you tell us which was the sexiest match that we watched?
I think it's got to be the Great Khali versus Con Delaney, because Con Delaney's a cute little twink boy.
Yeah.
So he fits that kind of niche little thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a cute boy. He's all bruised and broken already. That's got to be sexy, right?
The tights are a little loose on Con as well. I think that's probably like, you know, that's probably in there as well.
Slender frame and like big eyes, like naive eyes. Then, of course, you've got the Great Khali, who's like, massive, like the biggest guy pretty much ever.
If he had chest hair, that would literally be like, that would be on so many compilation
Well,
tapes,
I don't know how much chest hair adds to this.
It seems to be, if you're a bear beating up a twink, that seems to be
perfect.
like, yeah.
So you do want a kind of Braun Strowman character there.
Oh, jeez, I bet Braun is really the apple of a lot of people's eyes. I'll tell you.
With the Great Khali, you've got that moment where Colin's like in his chest. That's got to be a sexy moment, right? Or the head thing. The terrifying head thing. Is that sexy?
I didn't see that specifically being done as I know like submission moves are like a sexy thing for where the guy's like twisting the ankle or like adding pressure onto it. But I'm just fascinated.
Yeah, it's really exciting. As well now, I want to know, is it the story of the jobber that's kind of like part of the arousal?
Yeah.
Like...
So I think Colin's story of him, like, his mom doesn't know he's wrestling and he's only
forbidden.
Oh, you said you were going to McDonald's. You didn't say you were going to be beaten up by a stud. I'm sorry, Mom.
So, like, a compilation video of jobbers being beaten up, that wouldn't then be sexy, surely, because it's not got the full story?
I think it's kind of like, it would be to the equivalent of, like, having a compilation of sexy scenes, like,
Would it?
I mean, all I'm just saying is that the tapes that were traded around back in the day, and these sites all seem to base off compilations and video packages and playlists of jobbers being beaten up.
I mean, as far as fetishes go, in actuality, it's a pretty tame one. Like, it sounds a bit sinister, like, this big, huge guy taking advantage of a tiny, broken man.
I mean, it's what it is someone, it's co-opting something.
Yeah.
Because it's not like a lot of the fetish stuff, because there's a lot of fetish wrestling stuff out there, usually involving women, that is like filmed specifically for a fetish audience.
Yeah.
As in, two women will wrestle a certain style of match with certain moments in it that is, that's kind of established in its own little world. But this is like different because it's like fucking squash matches from the 80s that have found new life in a sexual subculture. I just think that's fascinating.
I do really need to know now if people have jacked it off to James Ellsworth.
If you have, tweet in.
Using the hashtag.
So, we've had some highs, we've had some lows, and creamy middle. Probably not the best time to use the phrase creamy middle.
God.
And other things. Let's get into some of your tweets and Facebook posts about the Rembrandts of the canvas, or jobbers.
I'm standing here with James Ellsworth, and James, no offense, but what in God's name are you thinking, stepping into the ring with a monster like Braun Strowman?
What am I thinking? Having a match on Raw is a dream come true for me. I didn't know it was going to be against Braun Strowman, so yes, I'm nervous. Yes, I'm scared. But if I could somehow, some way, pull off the upset, because I truly believe any man with two hands has a fighting chance, I can only imagine what that may do for my career.
Well, hopefully you still have a career after tonight's match, but good luck, man.
Wrong Island says, Ty Dillinger was a great example of enhancement talent who still became a fan fave and got a push to the main roster.
I think that's interesting because, like, there's loads of guys brought into NXT who've been brought in solely as, you're here pretty much as an enhancement or a job guy just to make other people look better. Like, Ty Dillinger was in WWE back in 2008. You know that time?
Wow.
Yeah. You know that time, the bit we were watching with Colin and Khali? He would have been there already.
Oh my god.
But he was boring and he didn't get over and they just cut him. And he was brought back for NXT because it was like, look, we need a guy who can wrestle but isn't very flashy and isn't particularly, not going to outshine any of our guys.
Yeah, because he was wrestling obviously when I first started watching. And he was good. Handsome man, obviously, but he wasn't doing anything spectacular.
No.
But I remember the turning moment of when he stopped being a jobber and started being like a talent in his own right, which was when we saw the NXT live show and he started bringing out those 10 placards.
That's how he got over. It was on the live shows because he couldn't do it on TV.
Yeah.
And then it got so over at the live shows, they're like, fuck it, do it on TV. And then it became so. I mean, he got himself onto the main roster, and whatever about what they're doing with him now. Ty Dillinger was not signed originally with the intent of touring around the world with SmackDown. That was not the idea. And that's the thing about like that position as being a jobber. for so many people, it's simply an opportunity to make the most out of.
Yeah.
Like, I know there was a tag team. I don't know if you remember this because this is going back a little bit. But on NXT once, the Revival took on a jobber tag team. And they were called the Jamokes. And one of them was really loud. He kept going, defense, clap, clap, defense. And he kept, like, trying to rile up the crowd for the jobbers to win. And they got killed. Those were actually guys from Chikara and from the Indies called 3.0. And they were just trying to try and get ourselves over.
Yeah.
Maybe we could get a contract out of it. So many guys start off there, and guys and girls start off like Blue Pants as well.
Yeah,
on
Blue
NXT.
Pants.
She was brought in not with the express intent of being someone that would be featured, just to make someone look good. And everyone liked her blue pants. She was brought in as enhancement for Carmella. She was a jobber for Carmella.
Yeah.
That's so weird, isn't it?
I always found that so weird because she's such a better wrestler than Carmella.
Because when Blue Pants first came out, Big Cass sang her theme song. He went, da, 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 and it just came out like that was the whole story. And she got so over. Got, pay-per-view appearances out of it. So yeah, you can really make a whole lot out of an opportunity as a jobber.
Pierre-Luc says, wrestlers often start as lower than jobber. Security, police officers, entourage, or rosebuds. And he's included a picture, this is great. It's of lots of wrestlers that we are familiar with now as big name stars in the background of other characters' terrible gimmicks. So we've got, fans may remember, Adam Rose, who had his partying gimmick back when I first started watching. And in the background you've got Braun Strowman.
I think, as far as I know in that picture as well, if there's a guy with a twirly mustache, that's Simon Gotch from the Vaudevillains. He's in there as well.
Simon Gotch in here, yeah. Let's see, I can also see Becky Lynch is in there.
Wow.
Charlotte's in there. I think that's Charlotte. It's hard to tell.
You know when Triple H, the WrestleMania you and I first watched when we were stuck on a bus in Horncastle that had broken down when we first started going out?
Of course.
I showed you Triple H versus Daniel Bryan. He came out as like a big gold god with all these like women in skull
and
masks.
it's Sasha and
Alexa
Charlotte
Bliss
and
is
Alexa,
there.
yeah.
It's crazy, like, yeah.
So cool.
Everyone has to start somewhere.
Yeah. Gurkumon says, we still need jobbers or we're stuck with just trading wins and losses. And some are cool, like the Brooklyn Brawler.
Absolutely.
Is the Brooklyn Brawler cool?
I mean, I've always liked the Brooklyn Brawler. He's full of fun stories. He got released a couple of year or two ago, and he's done interviews and stuff like that. And the guy's fascinating. Like because he's been there as an employee from the early 80s all the way till like 2 years ago. He's seen it all. He's seen all the ups and downs. Hogan come and go all those times. Austin coming up and leaving. It's Cena. It's just crazy to think one person could witness all of that in that role. You know what? You mentioned there about we can't just have people trading wins and losses. Someone tweeted this and really, really makes a lot of sense. We had so many injuries in 2016 and 2015. Fucking hell, you know what? If Big Cass the other week was, instead of fighting Enzo Amore and doing a crazy street fight, maybe if he just beat up a jobber instead, he wouldn't be out for 9 months. Yeah. There's so many times where it's guys who are having matches which, at the end of the day, are ultimately unnecessary. You want to put them on TV and feature them, I get that. Jobbers, that's your way to surely cut down on injuries.
They really don't do enough with jobbers these days, I don't think. And when they do bring them on, they don't let them have any personality, which again, that doesn't help things. You want to give these jobbers like a bit of character so that when they get beaten, it tells more of a story.
People make the point though about with Ellsworth, it was when people started chatting for the jobber. Yeah. And then if you've got a series of 6 weeks now where you've got a new crazy monster who's going to squash jobbers, and every week they're going to cheer for the jobber instead about how weird and silly the jobber looks. I don't know. Does that in the end do a disservice though, because the original role to bring him in for is to get someone over, and maybe you're distracting them then if they look too silly or they have character?
I think too much can definitely be the case, but I mean, in theory, if the other wrestler is doing the style that they should be doing and it's been booked properly,
you know what the perfect example of that is he's on our cover art. The reason he's on our cover art is because when I was showing our illustrator Dan all of the different jobbers, just to give him examples, he was like fixated on this one guy, which is the Gambler. The Gambler was a jobber in WCW who had cards. And when he first debuted as a jobber back in the late 80s, he would have the old the hat and the nice kind of Southern gentleman's jacket and tails. And then towards the end of his time, he was balding because he'd been there for so long, and he just had a kind of a shit jacket and a pair of cards. And he'd be like, "I'm the Gambler." And like that was it. His gimmick was he was the gambler. He had cards and he lost and was just a jobber. No one could feasibly get behind the gambler. So maybe we need some people like that on the roster instead.
Talking about the artwork, because like obviously this artwork was created before we'd done this episode, so I am not familiar with like pretty much any of the wrestlers on this. So I recognise James Ellsworth.
Yep.
I now recognise the Brooklyn Brawler.
Yes.
And the little poster. But like the other guys, there's no Con Delaney here, so who
No.
are the others?
So we got Barry Horowitz patting himself on the back on the right hand
Oh,
side.
that's him patting him on the back.
We've got Mikey Whipwreck rocking his best Dragon Wizard t-shirt there in the centre.
Oh my god, that's a t-shirt. I thought he actually had a head on his lap. I thought maybe there was this wrestler somewhere who had a weird gimmick where they carried around like this wizard head or something.
That shit'll never get over. And then SD Jones is reading the newspaper in there as well. Special Delivery Jones we mentioned at the start. So yeah, it was the original idea for the artwork was a massive pile of bodies.
Yeah.
But I kind of wanted to feature them a little bit more. So yeah, make sure you give Dan a follow on Twitter @Durdferts.
RoopDog21 says the most recent example of a jobber making the most of his opportunity would have to be James Ellsworth, beat the WWE champ. Do you think that's an example of a jobber making the most of their opportunity, or the fans making an opportunity because of the jobber?
It was a little bit of both. I think like Ellsworth, that promo that he cut, any man with two hands, like that sealed his fate. I mean, the fact that Ellsworth had a very unique look played a huge role in it. But Ellsworth himself, he said that like he was brought in just for that one show, and then he was walking backstage, and Vince McMahon went right up to him and was like, "You absolutely killed it." He thought he did such a good job. And I think it's them realizing that they could do something with him. And, you can hire Ellsworth. He's probably not making $1 million a year, Ellsworth. He's probably not making a whole ton at all. But I like that they found roles for him. I think that, I think if they have an open mind about that when they bring in job guys, that's where you find, like, the unique characters. You need to have other, as you say, you need to have diversity in wrestling. You have different body shapes, different sizes. And I think Ellsworth was just right place, right time, right shaped head.
Cody Reviews says, I think the best jobbers are the ones that don't make it about losing. They just keep on trucking along.
Absolutely. Hey, they're not going to win it this time. Maybe they'll win it the next time. You can be Barry Horowitz. He lose a couple hundred in a row. Then you get 3 big wins and then lose a couple hundred more in a row. You got to pick your spots.
Hey, still get paid. King Impulse says, the Kids Upset win over Razor Ramon is one of the most star-making singles matches in history. So that's the one we did for Scott Hall's episode, isn't it?
Yeah, it was funny because I was kicking myself when I realised, we're going to be doing a Jobbers episode, and I had shown you probably the most iconic Jobber match ever, which is Razor losing to the 1-2-3 Kids. But I guess it's just showing you, like, if you have that opportunity as a jobber and the stars align and there's a star who's willing to make you look good, as Razor was, he was very gracious, letting him, get stuff in and selling it the way he did. Immediate star making right there, because you go from a jobber to the jobber who beat the big star, and you've got a gimmick, you've got a story, you've got a feud, and you've got money probably in your future.
Absolutely. Alex Quinn says, definitely still have a role. Early NXT showed it's a good way of introducing new talent before they're ready or have a character. But then again, the likes of Braun or Nia or Ryback only improved once they moved on from jobber squashes to proper, inverted commas, opponents.
I think there definitely is like an upper limit as to how much you can learn from being with the job guys.
Short matches.
Yeah, that's really it. And I mean, I think with Braun, the reason why it worked was Braun had the look, but Braun didn't know how to carry himself and be imposing, and Braun also didn't know where his voice was.
Yes.
And I think just the short matches where he decimated people and let him carry himself as a monster, I think that just... he's able to channel that energy into then a promo, as opposed to waddling around in a 6-man tag with the Wyatts and then talking about snakes afterwards. Yeah. And you can see the nervousness in his eyes. I think that was just kind of playing to his strengths almost in a way. Well, we've had a lot of good chat about jobbers. This has been an absolutely enlightening episode. For me as well as you, I think, Joe.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say this is the first episode of How to Wrestling where everyone, with the exception of Brian Zane probably, has walked away learning something new. Our next episode is going to be a very interesting one indeed, Joe, because our next episode is going to be live. How to Wrestling is going to be live, King's Place Theatre, the 9th of September. Grab your tickets. It's going to be one of the most ridiculous episodes ever, when we're going to be looking at silly gimmicks Use the hashtag HowToSilly to let us know all of your favourite silly, weird and wonderful gimmicks that wrestlers have had over the years. We've obviously talked about jobbers this week, but I'm going to be talking about the likes of Mantor, the Repo Man, the all-powerful Oz, the Portuguese Man of War. These are all names like the Yeti and Roadblock. These are all names which mean nothing to you now, Joe, but in a few short weeks in the King's Place Theatre in London on the 9th of September, you will be amazed at the weird, silly, crazy shit that wrestling has turned out over the years.
Oh my goodness. I can only imagine. Like, occasionally when we're looking for matches, we'll be flicking through, like, pay-per-views from way back when on the network, and Kevin will show me some of, like, the random matches that I was like, oh, we'll be talking about him at some point when we do silly gimmicks. I am so excited to finally see some of these mad gimmicks that people have.
It's going to be so much fun. And this is one as well, which, like, if you're coming to see us live, this is the one to bring along someone who maybe doesn't know much about wrestling, or someone who's just gotten into it, or someone who even has no knowledge of wrestling whatsoever. So this is going to be for everyone. So we can all come in, and those of us who know can laugh along with those of us who don't and see the weirdness. And Joe, you getting to react to all this stuff, this is going to be condensed joy for me, for you to see all this stuff. This is going to be like the chicken skin on the roast chicken dinner of How To Wrestling. It's literally the best bit of wrestling. So if you've got any weird and wonderful gimmicks that you want Joe to find out about in front of our live crowd, do send them in using the hashtag HowToSilly on Twitter, following us at HowToWrestling, or over on Facebook.com/HowToWrestling. And if you've not done so already, head over to either our Facebook page or kingsplace.co.uk to get all the information about our live show. It will be recorded live and released for everyone to enjoy, but we want to see everyone there if possible. It's on a day, Joe, of wrestling podcasts for the London Podcast Festival, so you can see us. There'll be Attitude Era Podcast doing a live show later on the evening. Jim Smallman from Tuesday Night Jaw, he's going to be there. The guys from the New Generation Project, Gorilla Position, it's going to be fantastic. And if you get 3 tickets, you get 15% off. They're all available now. Go and get yourself some tickets, and we will see you live in London on the 9th of September, where Joe finally gets to find out who that weird wizard Oz actually is.
Yay!
That literally could be the whole episode. How to find out who Oz is.
Finally.
We'll bring him out from behind the curtain, like. Thanks very much for listening to this episode of How To Wrestling. And as always, if you're listening on iTunes, SoundCloud, or on Stitcher, make sure you leave us an old rating or review. Got a friend who wants to get into wrestling? Want to get one of your pals into wrestling, or a lapsed fan back into the current product? Send them How To Wrestling. Let them know about what we're doing here. And don't forget, for all your How To Wrestling needs, including episode guides, match lists, and articles from us and our pals, HowToWrestling.com. So get your tweets in for the live show, and we'll see you in London on the 9th. It's Joe's birthday then as well, so it's going to be really exciting. I hope all of you come and say hello afterwards. We're going to hang out. There's going to be, like, you want pictures, signing, whatever. We're all going to be hanging out afterwards. Let's all go have a pint. It'll be grand, sure. It's going to be a goodbye from me, Kevin.
And a goodbye from me, Joe.
Make sure you send in those gimmicks. Hashtag HowToSilly. And we'll see you on the 9th in London. And on another episode of How To Wrestling.
See ya!